Hi, I'm Edward Carr, I'm The Economist's Deputy Editor.
And I'm Alok Jha, The Economist Science Correspondent.
We've received many questions from you, and we're going to try and answer some of them right now. Overall impact on the economy over the next few months partly depends upon what governments do. There's a trade-off, if you like. The more governments try and keep people at home in order to stop the disease spreading, the bigger the effect on the economy. But already you've had various people who are following this, like the lobby group for hotels and hospitality in the US, saying that they think the effect of this will be as big as 9/11 and the global financial crisis wrapped up in one. You've seen airlines calling for many billion dollars in aid. You've seen an uptick in unemployment already, and Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, warning that without action, unemployment could reach 20%. And in the real place we've actually seen this affect more than anywhere else so far, which is China, you saw the various numbers for industrial production, retail sales, falling 13–20%, many times more than people were expecting. The model people have used initially when this started was SARS, which was a similar kind of disease that struck in 2003, and the bounce back there was really quick. But I think one of the reasons we've seen extreme falls in stock markets and other asset markets is it's become increasingly clear that SARS isn't a very good model. The problems go deeper and they'll last longer. Now, one of the things that government policy is trying to do is to keep essentially solid businesses that just happen to be hit by everyone staying at home, to keep those businesses going so that when things start to improve, they can pick up reasonably quickly. The worry is that a lot of businesses go bankrupt and then the process, the scarring, if you like, in the economy is much worse, and the process of recovery will be that much worse. So people have like three shapes of recession in mind. One is the V shape from SARS. I think that's looking very unlikely. One is the other is the U shape, where the bottom is quite long, but things really do pick up and kind of go back to where they were. And the one we want to avoid by saving companies and saving jobs is an L-shaped recession, where things go down and they stay down. So it's particularly hard for people who live hand to mouth. If you don't have savings and you have to get the crowded bus to work every day, your chances of catching the disease are higher. Your resources, if you do catch the disease and you can't work, are smaller. Your ability to go and see a doctor who's got the sort of healthcare that can help you are infinitesimal. I think, it's going to be really tough for such people. There are a couple of things that might help. Often, many people in these countries tend to be of a younger demographic group, and we know that the disease is particularly harsh on older people. The rural populations in some of these countries are larger, and it's easier, to keep away from people if you're on the countryside. But they also have very big favelas and very big slum districts which are crowded. So I think it's going to be particularly tough, and it's so often the way, isn't it, that diseases that hit the whole world hit poor people worst. I'll just say one other thing to add, which is when you take, say, the Ebola virus, in 2014, you got quite a good response from outside West Africa to help, and that was partly to do with humanitarian instincts, but partly self-interest. The rich world didn't want to see Ebola go. Well, right now, there isn't, the world's preoccupied with its own problems.
I think it's wishful thinking, but just because there's not much good evidence to suggest that hot temperatures would slow down the spread of this infection. There's no mechanism for that necessarily. However, what we should expect to see in many countries is that as the summer months come, the cases will probably dip. And that's not because of the effects on the virus itself, but because more people are going to be outside in the open air and less likely to be inside rooms with people who are infected. And so that's something you see in seasonal flu and all sorts of things. That does mean, though, that when winter comes, you're going to see another rise. So yes, heat in an indirect way will reduce infections, but I don't think there's any. It would suggest that the actual virus itself is going to be stopped that way. It's a fact that it will mutate. Every virus will mutate because there's an evolutionary arms race. It wants to infect you and multiply and go out into the world and infect other people. If your body or there's a vaccine that sort of stops it, it will find a way around it. And there was some early evidence, maybe a month or so ago, that this particular strain of the coronavirus had mutated to some extent, and so we're dealing with two. We're not sure what's happening with that exactly yet. Most mutations don't make any difference really to the sort of infection rates and so on. And the one ray of good news about mutations is that, generally speaking, a pathogen wants to, if it's new in humans, it wants to be able to survive in humans for as long as possible. And so what it does is it tries to sort of become less virulent because it doesn't want to kill you as quickly, because it wants to spend the time reproducing. So actually most mutations you see tend to be of that type. And yes, there's always the possibility that it could mutate to something else completely. Seasonal flu does that. Seasonal flu is different every year, and we have to come up with a new vaccine every year for it. But in general, it will mutate, and we just have to keep a watch on it.
There are some other coronaviruses out there, a couple of which cause colds, and those also are things that reinfect us every year. So it's too early to say whether this coronavirus will be similar. But it's something to bear in mind that this could become a seasonal kind of infection, and that you need to have vaccines. If they find a vaccine eventually, you'd have vaccines that are kind of predicting what kind of seasonal version you'll have.
That's the billion-dollar question. It takes normally a vaccine, it takes something like 5 or 10 or 20 years to introduce one from scratch. We've never seen this particular coronavirus before, and so there are some ideas of what you might do to sort of try and tackle it, but we're really starting from scratch pretty much. Now, we're hoping it's not going to take 20 years to create a vaccine. There were, in the wake of the Ebola epidemic 5 or 6 years ago, new practices were put into place to try and speed up the introduction of new vaccines, to try and do the trials faster, because you've got to go through many stages of clinical trials, which involve safety for human volunteers, and then giving them to people who actually have the infection. And so new protocols were put into place that allow you to develop a vaccine in quick time during the course of an epidemic. Now, even then, it will take something like 18 months to a couple of years before you're seeing vaccines available for people. Unfortunately, all my answers are we need more data, but I do know that there's a study about to start on exactly that. So we'll find out in about 2 years. And then there'll be long-term studies as well. This will be one of those things that people write about in economics textbooks in the future, of the generation that sort of left school for 6 months. So what happened to them?
Yeah, imagine they're more creative, more inquisitive. Obviously, in the very short run, there are emissions have gone down, and I have heard claims, or I haven't seen the evidence of it, that there are fewer people dying in China at the moment because there aren't so many road traffic accidents, and because the skies are clearer, there aren't so many people ingesting sort of toxins through aerial pollution. But most of the things that people are thinking about here are stocks. There are stocks of carbon dioxide and stocks of greenhouse gases, and this makes very little difference to the stocks. And in addition to that, if you get a big slowdown in investment, it slows the transition out of electric vehicles, photovoltaic cells, wind power, and so forth. So I'm not at all convinced that it's a net positive for nature.
Let me give you my hopes rather than what I think it will look like, what I know it will look like. One thing that I hope is that we, as a society, take more value in our experts. There's been, through various populist uprisings in the last few years, a sort of really a move towards not believing people who seem to be an authority. And although some of that might just be a hype, I feel like that there is this thing of that scientists and people who study all these sort of arcane ideas about how the world works might not be so useful to our everyday existence. Well, this shows you that a lot of that stuff is incredibly important in our responses to how the world operates. So this pandemic was predicted multiple times by many people. You can argue that some people listened and some people didn't, but those same sorts of people, scientists, are telling us about climate change, a much longer term thing, and we don't seem to be doing much on that front, or haven't been doing anyway. So I hope that there's a greater respect for these sorts of models and predictions that people are making. I also hope that it sort of does allow us to just appreciate that globalization is this wonderful force that's created much more opportunity for the world and wealth and so on, but that we aren't, all the separate countries that exist don't. There's no boundaries for viruses. There's no boundaries for pathogens and diseases. And that actually coordination is incredibly important for all of these things. We've been seeing the world separating itself politically in many ways. And I hope that this reverses some of that.
We're dedicated to bringing you the best reporting we can with the best analysis of this phenomenal story as it changes from one day to the next. And if you want to keep up with what we're doing, all of our coverage is available. If you just click on the link, you can see. And thanks for watching.